Welcome back to the Fox Robbins Business Show. Great to have you back. Come on in and sit a while. Fox Robbins Business Show. If you've seen it before, you haven't seen it before, it's all about developing your very best business ideas. And what we try to seek to do is to help, advise, and be cheerleaders for small business.
Cheerleaders?
But that's, you don't even have to have a business if you're just thinking about doing your own business.
Especially if you're just thinking about
Especially, yeah, pick us up at the point where you're just thinking.
Yeah.
And before you've done anything serious.
And stupid.
We've been around since 2008. And we've done
9 years?
North of 160 or so, shows or whatever on every topic about anything about small business.
Anything you wanted to know but were afraid to ask. I didn't know enough to ask.
And I'm Bill Fox. I'm the co-host of the show. The other co-host, though, get this guy is exemplary. He is incorruptible and meritorious. He's Coach Robbins.
Even if the Russians approach me, I'm incorruptible. Remember?
Incorruptible.
Well, maybe.
You have been advising small business for
Yes,
10 years.
Since the antebellum era,
before.
actually 16. 16 years I've been.
Wait a minute, 60. Where did that come from?
Because 2002, on January 2nd of 2002, I was teaching up at Bentley, then called college, now called university.
Oh, yeah.
And, living on Cape Cod was an hour and 15, 20 minutes away.
Yeah.
And the state director heard about me, met me, and hired me.
Yeah.
Poor girl. Right? And for the last 16 years, I've worked with over 3,000 entrepreneurs. Slightly less than half of the people I've worked with are already in business when they came to see me. And a little more than half of them want to start a business. Yeah. And I've helped literally hundreds, if not 1,000 small businesses get started and be successful. So, and I love doing it. It's just it's the best job I ever had.
Starting business is highly risky. It's fun. It can be fun and rewarding. It also can be grueling and difficult and risky.
But it is rewarding if like we say also in so many shows, we said if it's your passion and you're capable and you do it right, it's fun. I look forward to going to work every single day. I really do. I mean, if you're sitting there, like I've said, shaving or brushing your teeth, I don't shave, if you're shaving, and you say to yourself, oh darn, I've got to go to work today, man, you better find something else to do. But if you're passionate about your job, and people can get very passionate about their own business because it's theirs.
Yeah.
And I know I did it, I started 3 different businesses, and I loved them. I just enjoyed them very much.
But you better have that passion, man, because sometimes you may not feel like getting up in the morning.
Well, you know what? I tell my kids, I tell my grandkids now, look, if you go to work every day and there's nothing about your job you don't like, you don't have a job. Okay? If there's nothing about your small business that you own and you're running that you don't like, you're not running a small business. It's tough. It's tough to do. So you might as well do it right and learn to do it right.
Well, we've got speaking of which, we picked a topic today called seven actions to take after incorporating, Coach.
Right. Well, if you incorporate, after organizing, I would say,
Okay.
Yeah.
It's the message I had for you is that so-called sole proprietor is one thing.
Yep.
Incorporating is another. What does that mean?
Oh, absolutely. When you're trying to decide on an organizational structure, you're going to start your company, and the first thing you have to do is, quite frankly, in my opinion, my humble opinion, right, is you have to identify the risks involved. For instance, if you're starting a restaurant, there's a lot of personal risk involved, people getting sick, people choking, all kinds of things. And although you're going to carry proper insurances, and we're going to do a whole show about insurance very soon, you really want to get the risk off of you, to take your house out of the equation, if you're not borrowing money particularly, to take your life savings so that you probably won't be sued personally. If it's a sole proprietor, it's you. You have no protection. It's you. It's the same thing with a general partnership. It's you and your partner. And the funny thing about a partnership that people don't realize, if you and I go into a business and we have a partnership, right?
Right.
And let's say we're just 50-50 partners, and of course we can set that up any way we want.
Yeah.
And you're rich and I'm not.
Yeah.
If things go bad, go sour, you think they're going to come after me? No, they're going right after you. They go after the deep pocket. They just want their money, whoever it is we're talking about, whether it's whoever you owe money to, a bank or just a general creditor. They're going to go after you because you've got the deep pocket. See, when you form a corporate, use a corporate structure, you're setting up a separate person, literally, in the eyes of the law. So if you and I go into business together, and we do it through an LLC and an S Corp or any corporate, which we'll talk about, it's not us that's actually doing the business. We're employees of the business, we're stockholders, or in the case of an LLC, we're members, but we're not the business, it's a different person. We're employees, we're officers, we're a lot of things, but we're not the business. But when you're a sole proprietor or a general partner, it's you. It's you that's hanging out there. And I tell people, look, you can get started as a sole proprietor, do the right things here, which we'll talk about. But if it starts to get busy, especially when you have to hire another employee, because now you're going to be liable for their actions, that's when you have to consider taking the next step, which is doing it in a different organizational structure.
I think what we want to bring to your mind is that you say if you take the step to incorporate S Corp, C Corp, LLC, B Corp.
B Corp, no one, yeah.
Whatever, you take that step and say, okay, I'm a corp, that's it. Wrong.
Right. Well, yeah, that's it. You've just got off the starting line. You're out of the blocks now, but now you got to start running.
That's right, and that's what this show is all about. We've got suggestions that you've got to take care of right away.
You bet.
Action number one immediately is Coach is the infamous EIN or employer identification number. What's that all about?
Well, it's a very simple thing that you need a tax number if you want to call it a federal tax number. EIN number, you just simply call the IRS or email the IRS, and they'll give you the EIN, EIO. There's all kinds of alphabet
soup
out there.
Is it 8 digits?
Yeah, it's a bunch of numbers together.
Numbers.
04- something. It used to be. I don't know what it is lately. I haven't done it in 20 years.
If you're new to incorporation, you don't. Maybe you don't know now, but you're gonna know soon enough.
Oh, sure.
That number, that EIN, that identification number, will be called for, and you better have it.
Well, when you open a bank account, the banks today, because of money laundering and all that goes on, the banks will want your corporation. And of course, we're going to talk about that, and we've talked about it in the past. You got to open a separate bank account, even if you're sole proprietor. Different story. But when it's a corporation, ABC Corporation or ABC LLC. You go to the bank to open a bank account, they want your employer identification number.
The tax returns.
Tax returns. You got to file tax returns. I know. It's unfortunate.
Old EIN will not work. I mean, that's just if you had one from a previous corporation, whatever it's.
Well, it's different. It's assigned to a different organizational structure. This is your new corporation, ABC Incorporated. Call the IRS, get an EIN.
Okay, so we do that. Action number two, Coach, is various business licenses.
Yeah.
Let's talk to us about that, will you? What's going on here?
Well, when people come to me and say, what licenses do I need to do this or that? And I have a general idea because I'm not an attorney, but I know where they need to go to find the answers they need to find.
Yeah.
Depending upon when they're operating. We're operating a home, they got to go to the town, see if it's zoned for that, see, all kinds of things. The bottom line is there are several groups you need to deal with. First of all is the local city or town. You have to understand what the regulations are there for your type of business, your industry, and there are people there at Town Hall or City Hall that can help you and guide you very quickly through the proper processes. You want to open a restaurant in town, they're going to have to deal with the Board of Health, you got to deal with a lot of different, people, and they'll tell you everything you need to do to get the proper permits, the proper licenses. Because if you don't do it right, if you don't go and ask the questions and do it right, then you're running the risk of being shut down, of being fined heavily, and you just don't want to do that. You're starting a business because of this passion and you want to be successful. Go get the proper licenses, the proper permits from the town, and the next thing is the state. And in our state, mass.gov is a good website to go to look up to see what licenses you might be required in your particular field from the state. And if you do these things, maybe you need to go to the Mass Department of Revenue to get a tax exempt certificate. Maybe, I don't know. If you're reselling products, yes, you do. So they'll guide you in the process, and I can give you basic guidance, as can you, on the things you need to do to stay legal, to stay out of trouble.
Actually, you should know some of that stuff in advance.
Absolutely, you should do the
before
research.
committing to especially a business location.
Yeah, especially a location, because if you're going to want to open a particular business in a particular spot and it's not zoned for that, you should know that. Don't go signing a lease until you know you can go in there and the town's okay with you running that type of business in that location.
Especially now, I know in this state you get selling pot is becoming legal. You better know where to open that business, however.
Yeah, you better, especially that one.
Okay. Action number 3, Coach, is meet with a tax advisor. Not mandatory, but a very good idea.
Darn good idea.
What's your take on this, meeting with a tax advisor?
And you don't need to meet with a CPA, but you need to meet with somebody, because as you're running your business, you should understand the basics of how you're going to be taxed, what things are taxable, what things are tax deductible. What I see most of the time, when people don't keep their books straight to start with, and they don't understand the tax implications, you get to the end of the year, and the end of the year closes, and it's too late at that point to do certain things as far as mitigating your tax return, requirements.
Yeah.
You should have a tax advisor who kind of gives you the lay of the land, and you kind of know where you're going. For instance, if you're traveling on business, that you can get 50-something cents, a mile deducted if you keep the records a certain way. You need to understand the tax implications, whether you're a sole proprietor, a partnership, or some corporate structure. You need to really have some basic understanding of what's going on when it comes to federal and state taxes.
Well, you just pushed one button, and I know about, which is tax receipts, or for
Critically important.
critical.
Right.
What receipts? I mean, everything you do when you step out of the house, if you get something to eat, if you get gas, if you buy something at the store. I mean, I don't care what you do.
For the business, yeah.
And if it's for the business,
Right.
Or not, don't mix it, and don't mix. You have your tax receipts. Don't throw them all
In one box, no.
The inevitable shoebox.
Yeah.
You have business receipts. Keep them separate.
Yeah, and those receipts are recorded in your
and get
your
receipts.
bookkeep. Yeah.
I know. You may not be used to that. To say, just go buy something and use a credit card, write a check or cash or whatever, and say get something. End of story. And maybe you did that as a sole proprietor operating out of the trunk of your car, but now you need a receipt and and ask for a receipt and get a receipt.
And log it into your books and keep that receipt filed in a proper location.
Toll receipt if you're driving on a toll road.
So it makes it much easier for your tax
Yes.
advisor at the end of the year to allow you to get the proper deductions.
Right.
Because I guarantee you, when you turn in your tax return, nobody from the IRS is going to call you up and say, "Excuse me, but you missed your mileage deduction." Ain't going to happen that way.
And I've noted on here, Coach, S Corp, C Corp, LLC. Now, S Corp, that's where you're talking about the tax advisor. He or she will tell you you still file an individual return.
Yeah, you do still file well, there's two basic types of corporate structures. I know LLC is still a corporate structure, as is B Corp, but the two basic ones are C Corp and S Corp.
Yeah.
Well, C Corp files a tax return, pays taxes at that level, and then the difference is, remainder for whatever the stockholders own. And all public corporations are C Corps, because they have to be, because they've got 10,000 or 1 million, people, even foreign nationals, who own stock in it. A small business, 99% of the time, if they're going to use the corporate structure, they're going to use the S Corp. Subchapter S Corporation does not pay an income tax. For instance, if you and I form a business and we start an S Corporation, Magic Consulting Company, lousy name, doesn't it? Incorporated, and it's an S Corporation, we each own 50% of the stock. We draw our salary out of that corporation. We work in the corporation, maybe, and that's the salary we get for being employees of the corporation. It's not us. We're employees of that corporation. At the end of the year, our tax accountant says, well, guess what? Your corporation shows a profit after all expenses are paid, including our salaries, of $100,000. Great. We will each get a Schedule K sent to us for $50,000, because you own 50% of the company, I own 50% of the company, and that will go on our personal tax returns. The corporation will file on March 15th. The personal, you and I, will file our tax returns on April 15th, and we will pick up each $50,000 of that return, of the profit of that corporation.
So, tax advisor, you don't have to do it, but it's a very good idea.
You got to do it. It's crazy not to do it, and it's crazy not to have somebody, like I said, it doesn't have to be, Deloitte.
Deloitte Touche and all that.
You don't need that, but you do need somebody that understands the tax implications of what you're doing for 12 months.
Right. Action number 4 you're going to take is open business bank account or what, or deal with the bank. Coach, what do we got to do here?
Well, whether you're a sole proprietor or not, you should not mix your personal money with the business money. You should keep it separate, all right? And keep separate books on it and really understand this is the company, this is me. Now, when it comes to a corporate structure, obviously, it's a different person, like we've said, in the eyes of the law, and you will want to go to your bank, and if you and I had Magic Consulting Incorporated or Magic Consulting LLC, we would go to the bank and we'd open up, obviously, a separate checking account, so that when we get checks to Magic Consulting, those checks go in the bank, so that when we spend money, we spend them out of that checkbook, and the check as well as the receipt goes into your tax record. You need to set up a separate business. It's a business account. You need the EIN to do it, and you really have to be able to do that to keep things clean. So if, God forbid, the IRS comes in and wants to audit your books, there's the business. Your personal stuff is different. They may want to audit it, but it has nothing to do with the business. In a sole proprietorship, the money's yours anyway. If you want to take $5,000 out of your sole proprietor DBA, which we'll talk about, business, that's your money. Put it in your personal account, go ahead and spend it. You're still going to pay taxes at a personal level.
Right. So checks and payments. Payments, if you're purchasing from vendors, you have excellent documentation of expenditures with vendors.
Sure, you got an invoice. You paid the bill.
And a check, whatever.
The invoice to the paid receipt, and you got it.
Wire transfers. Don't say to me, what is that? I mean, wire transfer is moving money. Instead of by check, by electronic means, between the banks. It's a if you haven't dealt with it before, it's a common practice. But it's excellent, an excellent way to move money, because money comes into your account. It's money immediately like that.
Available.
Instead of by check waiting for 10 days.
Yeah, there's no float. We talk about a float.
Or check getting canceled. When you thought you had a check,
right,
and the guy who wrote it, canceled the check.
Well, that's what I mean by the float. If you mail, if you get a check in the mail and you go and deposit it in your account, you're not going to have access to those funds until that check clears back in their bank.
A
And
wire
also-
transfer, if you don't know anything about wire transfer, just, allow time, sit down with the banker and ask, what that is and how that
It ain't
works.
rocket science. Yeah.
Business credit card, that's one way to segregate funds, is to charge have a credit card, for the business.
Yeah, Magic Consulting has a credit card. You have a copy, I have a copy, and when we buy something for the business, we use we go to Home Depot and we buy something, that's going into the building or our business or whatever. Right there, you're creating a trail. That's what I like to say.
And your loans, if you get a loan or get loans and so forth, to the business, not to me personally.
Right.
But you do that, through the bank, and all the paperwork is taken care of.
Simple.
Record keeping is orderly, and you're going to stay out of trouble. So, deal with the banker if you haven't done so.
If you don't keep your records accurately, I've said this thousands of times, you can't manage what you don't measure. You can't keep your records, you can't get real financial statements, and you don't know what the heck's going on in your business.
Action number 5. You mentioned this earlier, Coach. This is something, again, if you're not acquainted with this, listen carefully. Coach, what about DBA?
DBA, very simple. I do it this way with my students. I say to them, did you ever hear of Boston Beer Company? And I have never once had one of them say, oh yeah, I've heard of them. Never heard of them. Oh, have you ever heard of Sam Adams? Oh yeah, that's a beer company. Well, no, it's not. That's a brand, right? But the Boston Beer Company is the name of the corporation that Mr. Cook and many other investors own, and they sell a brand, among other things, called Sam Adams Beer. They make and sell Sam Adams. The name of the company is the Boston Beer Company. The name of the brand is Sam Adams. So what Boston Beer does is goes and gets a doing business as certificate from the city of Boston, which is, I think, where they are. It might be in a suburb. I don't know exactly where they are.
You say, would you do that with the city or the state?
You do it with the city, the town. You do it with the town. You go to the town. Okay. So you and I want to open up Magic Consulting. Well, that's not your name and that's not my name.
Right.
But we are, whatever it is, a corporation, or if it's a corporation, it's a different thing, because we will incorporate the company in Massachusetts as Magic Consulting. We don't need a DBA certificate. That name is the name we're operating under.
I don't know, if that company was doing this TV show, would you then say DBA, doing business as Fox Robbins Business Show?
Exactly. Right. Because DBA stands for doing business as. If I open up Magic Retail Company, Magic whatever, and it's just a sole proprietorship, well, that's not my name. My name's Cliff Robbins, right? If I open a company and that says just Cliff Robbins Consulting, well, I don't need a DBA certificate because they know who Cliff Robbins Consulting is, Cliff Robbins. So it's doing business as is what the DBA stands for. It's some people call it a business certificate. Some towns require a business certificate and a DBA certificate. So you go to the local town where your business is housed, that's where you get your DBA certificate.
It says file the DBA after incorporation.
Well, if it's a corporation, you may not need a DBA certificate. If the name of the company was Sam Adams Incorporated, and they filed with the state as a corporation, which they didn't, you wouldn't need a DBA certificate because that's the name they're using as a brand. But they don't. It's the Boston Beer Company Incorporated, and they doing business as Sam Adams Beer, So you have to understand, they're just trying to pin a brand to somebody who's responsible, whether it's a corporation or an individual.
Item number 6, guys, is protect yourself. Trademark protection, Coach. What's that all about? What do we do here? What are we doing here?
I have a friend who knows how to make Coca-Cola. He can make it. He's got all the equipment. He can make his own Coca-Cola, but he'll never be able to sell that product under the Coca-Cola trademark, right? Because they've trademarked it with the USPTO, the United States Patent Trademark Office in Washington, and they're the only ones that can use that script in the name Coca-Cola and Coke and lots of other things that they have protected. They're protecting their brand, right? So copyrights and trademarks, I've seen it twice, and I'm sure it's happened more than once, where a restaurant was very successful. Their lease came up, they didn't own the building, they moved to a new location, and what happens in that building? A restaurant opens up using that very same name, usually owned by the owner of the building. They didn't protect that name. They didn't trademark it, didn't copyright it, didn't do a darn thing. And it's just crazy. If you're building a good brand identity and a brand name, why don't you protect it?
Right. And maybe in the state in which you operate, but what about all the other states too? Right?
That's where you go to the USPTO, the trademark office in Washington, and you protect it there. Now you've covered it in all 50 states.
Okay. All right. And action number 7.
Yep.
Action number 7 is keep it clean, stay compliant, Coach.
Yeah, just to make sure you file. If, for instance, if we had a corporation, an S corporation, you and I are 50-50 partners, or if we had an LLC and you and I are 50-50 members, just different verbiage, very similar, we have to file with the state every year. And if it's an S corp, I think if you file online, it's only $100, and you're the president and I'm the treasurer or whatever, and just keep the corporate structure clean. And even if it's a sole proprietor, just make sure you do things according to the law.
Don't do something, well, either by commission or omission, do something that threatens that legal liability protection.
I see more things done by omission than commission, quite frankly. People don't do the things they're supposed to do, let alone doing things wrong. That means you know what you should do maybe, and you do it wrong, or you don't know what you should do and do it wrong. But I see a lot of people make errors of omission. They don't realize, oh, I have to do this? Yes, you do. That's why you need business advisors.
There's little things that an annual report, if you incorporate annual report, state and federal taxes we've talked about, annual stockholder meeting.
Sure, yeah.
That can be all of 5 minutes,
I used to have a stockholder meeting every year with the corporations I owned 100% of. It was me and me. And the lawyer draws it up, puts it in the book, everything's legal, file my $100 with the state, all set.
But you did it.
But you gotta do it every year, and a lawyer, I had a lawyer that did it, and you do it every year.
Okay, guys, well, stay compliant.
Keep clean.
Do what you have to do once you incorporate. Don't just crawl into a hole. You've got actions that you have to take that we've gone over in this show. And thank you again for watching Fox Robbins Business Show. Thanks for coming. Our past shows of Fox Robbins are on YouTube. So go to the internet, go to YouTube, type in a one single word, Fox Robbins, FOXROBBINS. Click and go to the library of past shows, and you can watch them at your convenience and so forth. And send us an email if you want. That would be fine. The email address is foxrobbins@gmail.com. And by the way, we will see you next time.